then
Oh, I'm
and
sorry,
then
you
if
want to
you
share
want
first.
to, you can take over the displays there.
Okay, great, great. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, great. And you can see
Anyone
me.
else?
So,
I see some nodding heads at the bottom there.
okay. Good, good, great. Okay. Well,
Right.
thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate this. I think Blaine and Josh, if we've been talking, right, I've been running a Marketo user group for a couple of years now, but this is actually my first time presenting to a user group that's not mine. So I thank you so much for having me here. And I think it's an exciting topic, too, given kind of the number of different companies that are out there trying to work with Marketo through multiple different brands. So I think it'll be an area that's worth exploring. Just a little bit of background for me. So I'm Michael Tucker. I'm a Marketo certified expert. I've been using the platform for, I guess, about 5 or 6 years now. I run the Conversion Store. We're a marketing automation agency, and we focus in Marketo specifically. Try to really, provide kind of a managed service to be able to help different companies make it easy to use Marketo and to kind of empower some of their different stakeholders internally or externally to be able to use the platform and make the most out of it. And I put my contact information on up here. There's a lot of topics that we want to be able to cover as a part of this. And so just want to encourage you that if you have any questions that we don't answer in this session, please feel free to reach out to me at any of these information, and we'll have some resources that are available for you to be able to download as well too on our website at theconversionstore.com or conversionstore.com, excuse me. So let's talk a little bit about why you would use Marketo for multiple brands and where this actually becomes useful. So, this is a little bit more marketing theory. I'm going to jump through this really quickly, and then we can dive into the platform itself and to show you where this works. But I'd rather start with an example and just kind of say, okay, here's where this might become useful. And, what we wanted to do is kind of talk about an example, a fictitious example using a real world company. So some of these situations are not true, they don't exist, but if they did, we just thought we'd use some useful brand names that you might see in your local grocery store that you might be familiar with. And so we wanted to start off with General Mills. And General Mills is a big conglomerate that makes that's in the food production business and all different types of food. And so you probably know General Mills less than you know the brands that they own and that they work within. And a lot of that's in the B2C space, but they also are in B2B as well too. So General Mills, it would have an extra brand. They might use Marketo themselves to be able to communicate to shareholders or different suppliers or employees or different stakeholders, maybe media relations, things like that. For their investor relations, but if they have a brand extension, they own a whole bunch of different brands in the cereal business. So Cheerios is a great example of that, where they would use a different brand there. Let's say they wanted to do a line extension. Let's say that Cheerios, obviously a very successful cereal, moving that from beyond the original flavor to Honey Nut Cheerios. That's a different brand. If they do a joint venture, let's say that Walmart comes to them and says, we'd like you to be able to produce a cereal in our great value store brand. Well, you need another brand now inside of your Marketo instance to be able to handle this great value cereal that they produce. Or if they buy another company, so recently they bought Blue Buffalo dog food, and that's another brand that you might use within your instance. So how do you set that up inside of Marketo? Because all four of those different brands are going to have a different domain name involved in them, and they're going to have different salespeople, different distributors. Some of them are sold in different spots. You can buy Blue Buffalo inside of a PetSmart, but you're probably going to have a difficult time finding groceries for you at your typical PetSmart. So you have different distribution channels that exist there as well too, and that makes a real difference when you're trying to kind of say, okay, well, where do we need to assign leads? Where do we need to assign customer inquiries for each of those different brands? Marketo can actually handle all of those different things. Let's move beyond a B2C example and talk a little bit about B2B and kind of where this exists with the channel to be able to deliver some of those different goods. So, in the manufacturing user group that I run, We talk about being able to kind of move a product from manufacturer to distributors to dealers to value-added resellers and end users. And in the B2B space, let's use the same example from a B2B side of things, where if you're running a Marketo instance, let's say for Honeywell, which is a big company that works in a variety of different technologies, from aerospace to security systems. But let's take the security example. They might sell their products to a market in Canada or in Europe through a Demco, which is a distributor that they actually purchased several years ago. So they're vertically integrated, but it's a different brand altogether as well. And the Demco might sell one of their security cameras or a keypad that they would use through ADT, which is a different brand. And they might contract, ADT might then sell that camera or that product through Securitas, which is, a systems integrator who might be able to use the cameras and all sorts of other components to be able to help build a security system for the California Department of Corrections if you wanted to build a jail or a prison, for example. So it's not just applicable from a B2B sense. Having a Marketo instance manage multiple brands is also applicable from not from a B2C, but also from a B2B side of things. Why is this important to us from a business perspective? Well, owning the sales channel, regardless of where you are, whether you're the distributor or the manufacturer, it helps you to be able to kind of get better visibility into where your products or services are flowing to the end consumer or the end user that's going to be using those. And so that gives you the ability to kind of say, well, where are the bottlenecks? And you think about it a lot kind of like we think about being able to generate leads and move them through the lead lifecycle process, right? Where are the bottlenecks? Where are the areas where we're seeing pushback, where we're not able to sell our products as fast as we'd like them to, or maybe where we can speed those up? Where do we see fulfillment requirements where maybe we are seeing a lot of sales that are happening in one specific area of the sales channel? If we're able to kind of use Marketo to kind of attribute and view some of the velocity of business that's happening with any one of these partners, how much faster is it for us to be able to kind of manufacture or have our products available to be able to restock or refill, whether it's a box of cereal or a security camera, that still helps us to be able to move more product and increase the overall sales and revenue within our business. And then finally, talking about creating communication talking about addressing challenges, areas where we might slow down, this also gives us the ability as marketers to kind of say, well, where can I develop more content? Where can I develop more marketing collateral? If I am Honeywell, I'd love to know if ADT is having a challenge being able, or they're getting the same question that's asked of different system integrators of the camera that I supply to them. And knowing that gives me the ability to maybe produce a brochure, produce an email, produce a social media campaign, maybe a webinar that helps to be able to answer that question. And if I can do that for ADT, well, that helps me to sell more product faster, and it helps them to say, I'd rather buy a Honeywell camera than a camera from another manufacturer. So there's a lot of dollars and cents reasons why you would use your Marketo instance to be able to help, work with different brands, regardless of whether they're your internal brands or whether they're brands with a sales channel partner. Does that make sense? Okay. So different elements that you can incorporate here, and I'm not going to go through all of these in depth right now, but just keep this slide in mind where you're thinking about, okay, well, when you have a brand, what are the different digital elements that exist that make up that brand? You have you have the domain names, of course, is kind of an obvious one. When we look at Cheerios.com, I know I'm going to go for Cheerios breakfast cereal. If I go to CinnamonToastCrunch.com, I know I'm getting that. If I go to Honeywell.com, I know I'm getting that brand. Look at the logos that exist. Look at the email addresses that exist, and which landing pages you want to be able to use for each of those different brands are going to change. What sort of copy resonates with different target audiences for those brands? If you're eating original Cheerios, you're probably health conscious and looking to be able to lower your cholesterol. If you're eating Cinnamon Toast Crunch, you're probably not. But your kids probably love it and they think the taste of it is amazing. And so those are different considerations where you want to be able to adjust your marketing. Marketo has the ability to be able to kind of scale out, not just across the marketing communications for one brand, but across all of these different brands. And so, we're going to show you how to be able to build your marketing activities and your reporting and all of the things that you see on the right side of this screen to be able to quickly roll those out in a way that meets the different branding needs across your organization. So you can have conflict in between brands too, and that's part of the reason why you have to be careful as you're going to expand your Martech stack across different brands, because in some situations there are specific companies where two different brands that compete in the same area might conflict with each other. In the financial community, oftentimes you talk about a Chinese wall where certain elements of a stock brokerage aren't able to sell to other elements that are trying to sell stocks, aren't able to talk to other elements that are looking to be able to buy stocks for different institutional investments. So there's legal requirements in some cases. Who are the sales personnel? Sometimes there's channel conflicts with some of the sales personnel for each brand, and who should be responsible. Do you send a lead to one pool of salespeople, or do you have different salespeople that specialize in working with specific brands versus other brands? What happens after you hit marketing qualified? Are there other third-party agencies who aren't involved with the instance at all, and are just looking to be able to develop creative that actually meets the branding guidelines for each of those businesses? And then in terms of your Marketo instance, what type of work has to happen to be able to protect the reputation of your Marketo instance in the digital community, so that your emails are actually being delivered to the inboxes of specific groups and they don't wind up being going into spam. If one business unit is off sending out emails to anyone without any thought to data governance, without any thought to IP address or their domain name, well, that actually has the ability to conflict and bring down the reputation of other brands that are using the same instance. So it's really important that you have data governance that exists at the corporate level between all of those different brands. So before we go into platform operations, we just want to make sure that everybody kind of understands that all makes sense as well too, right? That there's, you can have more than one different brand, but from a marketing communications perspective, that each of those brands has different needs and has different complexities to it, right? So let's talk about platform operations for multiple brands. And really, I think the first place we want to start off in platform operations, we really mean kind of the structure that you have behind the scenes inside of your Marketo instance to really start putting together your marketing campaign. So before you go out and kind of tie together all of your domain names into Marketo, you really have to give some thought to what does my organization look like, and how do I structure my instance to be able to kind of meet those security requirements we talked about before. And so you really should start with your organization chart and kind of say, okay, here's an example where General Mills is the enterprise and Cheerios and Blue Buffalo cereal are both tied into to one specific brand. So in that case, you really want to look at incorporating workspaces and partitions into your Marketo instance, so that the sales and marketing departments that are responsible for Blue Buffalo don't have visibility for the marketing activities and the design studio assets inside of Cheerios, right? You don't really want to send a Cheerios, and likewise, you don't want to send a family that eats Cheerios an email about that might accidentally have Blue Buffalo dog food in it, right? So it's important that you have kind of those walls to sort of divide those up if that's how your organization is set up. And this isn't to say that any of these brands are actually structured this way, but that Marketo has the ability for you to be able to kind of segment them off if you want to. So we set up a different workspace for each of those brands and then tie the domain name to that workspace. And whether you need a partition or not, a partition basically kind of ensures that your database is divided off as well, so that the leads inside of your database. So a workspace will kind of separate out your marketing assets, your design studio assets, and other areas inside of the UI in Marketo from specific groups of users. The partitions are there to really design and split off the leads that exist within the database. So they're less easier to see. And the important thing to note about them is that if you do set up partitions inside of your instance, you can't have duplicates. So if Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Cheerios both have a Marketo workspace, if you set up a partition between those two businesses and family A, the Smith family, eats both Honey Nut Cheerios and eats Cinnamon Toast Crunch, they're going to run into a problem where they can't exist in both partitions at the same time. So it's complicated from that standpoint, but it's worth kind of looking at that and kind of exploring it first off. So, let's jump back for a second and talk about how to structure out your Marketo instance. Which do you use? Which users do you connect to which workspaces? And so if you have the opposite of the org chart that we looked at before, what happens if your marketing department manages all of the different brands, right? You might still have workspaces that are kind of divided for different marketers that are working with all the cereals in General Mills versus all of the different dog food brands that General Mills owns. But it's important to be able to kind of say, well, in Marketo, you have this ability to set up users and then pick the roles that those users belong to. So in this user, you could have an admin. You can give them admin access to the Cheerios workspace, to the Cinnamon Toast Crunch workspace, but not the Blue Buffalo dog food one. So that level is something you need to start off thinking about right away. And then the next piece to think about is, well, now that I have my workspace created inside of Marketo, what do I put into it? What type of programs do I need in order to be able to communicate with my audience? And more importantly, to be able to kind of track where those leads are kind of engaging inside of the platform. Do I send out emails to them? How do I keep track of scoring inside of the breakfast cereal business versus the pet food business? And so it's important to be able to kind of set up different channels that kind of meet the needs of each of those businesses and understand if they have a different program status that's needed in there. That you can actually set up Marketo in a way that your channels have the correct statuses for one business, for the breakfast cereal business, let's say that eats breakfast cereal, and that might be different from the pet food side of the business. And then also I would recommend setting up a tag above and beyond that. So you're going to send out email programs in both businesses, but a way to differentiate those in your reporting is to set up a tag specifically that says filtered by brand or by business unit, and make that required so that any marketer who's setting up a marketing program inside of your Marketo instance has to correctly identify what business unit that belongs to. And then later on, towards the end of this presentation, I'll show you how that ties in together with your reporting that you get from revenue cycle analytics and from your program analyzer and some of the different areas in Marketo. And then we'll talk about, custom fields. So attribution tracking by brand. Now you can do this inside of your programs as well and be able to kind of track, net new leads by program membership and say, okay, what's the first time that a lead has become a member of a program that has a tag by a specific brand? But also, think further down the line. What happens after that lead becomes marketing qualified, and you really want to say, okay, where is all of that? Where are all those new leads being driven by in the business? And so I would recommend that you look at really saying, do I need extra fields to actually track program name, the acquisition date of the program that acquired that lead, and have that broken out by each of the different lines of business that exist inside of the enterprise, so that a lead that comes to buy breakfast cereal for the first time for General Mills and then goes to buy pet food 6 months down the road, you can actually see that progression in terms of how that family is kind of adopted or first come into the whole General General Mills database, and what areas, what period of time, what specific marketing activity caused them to actually opt in and raise their hand and say, okay, yes, we're interested in this product. Oh, and now we're interested in this product. And that in and of itself tells you something, but it also gives you an area to be able to store that information that you can then pass along to Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using to be able to, because that's important for sales leadership to understand as well too. So your domain name, really obvious, important one. So your DNS entries, you need SPF, DKM, and a subdomain name, both for your branding domain that you're going to put on all of the links for your emails that's sent out, but then also for your landing pages that go out too, so people can go to your domain name, a subdomain in your domain name, and be able to access a Marketo landing page that they publish out. And all that's really important for email deliverability. I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts on the DNS server side of things. That's if you look at the protocols article inside of the Docs Marketo link, you can find information on how to configure that there. And I actually have published a LinkedIn article called the Digital Marketer's Guide to Domain Names. That also shows you a little bit about the nuances of how to set this up. So you can find that by searching this name on LinkedIn. But once you set up your DNS server and you work with your IT team to do that, you'll see when you go to send out an email, you'll see, one of the things that people don't realize, if you put in your domain name after it's been configured, you should see a key icon on the right of your, I think that's your from field, that should turn green. And if you mouse over it, you'll see that it verifies that your DKM value and that this is an email address that's actually signed by Marketo to make sure that the deliverability is even better set up for it. So look for that. If you don't see a green key, happy to be able to kind of talk you through that offline. But check to see that the email that you're sending from, that the domain name that's tied to that email is actually registered and verified inside of Marketo. And so this is where you would go and do this. So you can see, I'm putting screenshots up. A lot of them have been anonymized. But if you look inside of your admin panel in Marketo and go into the email tab, that's where you'll see screens that show you where to set up multiple SPF DKM values and then where to configure your branded domain. So you set them up in your DNS server with your IT team. But then after the IT group does the setup, you have to go back into Marketo and you have to verify those domain names. Otherwise, they're not going to be added into the Marketo instance as well. And in another piece here, this is just cut off, but at the bottom of here, you'll have a drop-down field once you set up more than one domain name. Or register more than one branded domain, where you can actually pick multiple branding domains out of any email that you happen to be sending at a given period of time. And then at the end of the day, again, from a platform operations perspective, this is just the example life cycle model that Marketo provides in all of the instances. And this green path really just shows the fastest route from going to an anonymous lead to an actual customer. But again, if you look at the different types of business models that are out there that we discussed earlier on, these stages might be dramatically different in the pet food example that we talked about versus the security camera example versus the breakfast cereal example. So that's important to be able to kind of look at those different examples and kind of say, okay, I'm going to build out a different lifecycle model for each of those businesses, and you can do that inside of Marketo. And having those different fields that exist for each of those different businesses give you the ability to quickly differentiate those different customers as they're moving along. So again, going back to the Smith family might eat both General Mills breakfast cereal and buy General Mills pet food for their pet, and so you could be a lead in both life cycles at the exact same time and kind of work your way through that. And each of those marketers will need that information. So important to kind of look at this structurally and say, okay, it's not just the marketing programs I'm building out. How am I tracking this on the back end of my database to make sure that I understand where a customer is while interfacing and engaging with both of those brands? And then the next piece here, so you've set up all of the structure inside of your Marketo instance. Great. And you've got that built to all of the different brands that exist in your company. What about everything that happens after or outside of Marketo? What are the other elements that are inside of your MarTech stack in your organization that need to bolt into Marketo? So think of your CRM, your Salesforce.com campaigns that your sales team might use to be able to meet different initiatives that they're trying to accomplish inside of your sales operations group. Or social media campaigns. Where do you go ahead and use remarketing and retargeting across maybe Facebook or LinkedIn, or using a paid search method to be able to engage some of these customers, especially with some of those B2C examples that we talked about. That might be a really important piece. And then other elements, kind of switching back to B2B. When do you need to do a net promoter score for some of these people who become customers or who are involved in a marketing program to say, listen, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your level, what's your willingness to be able to refer somebody else, a friend, a colleague, to the brand and the marketing activity that we've created here? On the Salesforce side, we'll touch on this really quickly, but it's important to understand that when you set up your Marketo to Salesforce instance connection, to make sure that user that's in Salesforce has visibility to all of the different Salesforce campaigns that you might want to push a lead to, regardless of they're in one brand or another brand, and then from there. While the one Salesforce lead has access to all of the different lines of business, then you go into your Salesforce instance and you might set up role hierarchies, or again, consult with your Salesforce administrator on this, but that's where you actually do kind of the division of information that you're getting from Marketo into Salesforce. Set up your Salesforce rules to be able to properly match the organization. So you have a kind of a parallel that we talked about earlier about which marketers are involved with which brands. From the Salesforce side of things, you want to give the same thought to which salespeople, which sales directors are involved with which brands, and then set up those rules accordingly as well. And then on the social media campaign, so sort of similar in the sense that, Marketo has one account for each of the social media platforms that you can sync for each Marketo instance. In Facebook Manager, for example, or LinkedIn advertising, you want to be able to authorize one user who has visibility to all of the different social accounts, whether that's directly or whether that's set up, as a partner in the Facebook Business Manager, in your Business Manager settings, and be able to do those invitations, so that in Marketo you can quickly pick all of the different custom audiences or matched audiences that you want to be able to push leads into for whichever brand that you're trying to be able to pass from Marketo to the social media platform for remarketing purposes, for example. This can be used a lot of different ways, and it's beyond the scope of this, but it's worth mentioning. Set that up, but understand that that you'll need to be able to set up to come to an agreement with your social media group as to which user you're going to sync with Marketo, and that they have the visibility to all of the different brands that are necessary across the enterprise. Are there any questions about that? Let me just pause for a minute. Actually, there's a lot that we covered off there. So, does anybody have any questions there that I can answer?
So on the Salesforce alignment part of that, though, is that really fall under sort of your petitioning, and who are the owners of those different leads and the different petitions, and that correlates to who's basically the owner of that lead on the CRM side? Is that how that's mapped?
Yeah, it's a little bit different. The partition side of things is strictly within Marketo.
Right.
Where you assign lead ownership on the Salesforce side of things happens in two potential places. So one of them, you can do it. You can set up ownership actually within Marketo itself, and you have that flow step that says sync to SFDC for that lead. You can actually assign ownership there. The other spot that you can do that is inside of Salesforce itself, and they have, lead assignment rules that you can create inside of your Salesforce instance for new leads that are created. So, that piece you'll want to. It's irrespective of a partition. You could have multiple partitions in your Marketo instance and have all of them sync to. You can only have one Marketo instance that syncs to one Salesforce instance natively without doing other you can put middleware and do some other more complicated pieces in between that. But just talking, about the native Marketo to Salesforce connector. So all of the lead ownership at that point in time, you assign that either using that flow step or using the assignment rules that are created inside of Salesforce.
Good.
Sense?
I have a question as well. So you talked about in the Facebook custom audiences. Have you found a smart way to push that over automatically? Yeah, I've not, because normally you have to select that list
No.
and then send it over, and it's kind of annoying, and you select your custom list.
Yeah. No, I haven't. I think what the best thing to do with that is to be able to kind of talk to your your social media folks directly, and kind of map out for them as collectively exhaustive as possible a list of custom audiences that they would like to be able to use, right? And kind of build those out by what are the target audiences that you want to use for each brand, right? That's kind of more of a social media conversation,
Yeah.
and I think that's the fastest way to be able to do that. If you can, those lists can be used inside of Facebook Ad Manager for all sorts of different campaigns and all sorts of different ad sets that they want to use for. And I think that if they can be as granular as possible, but also as exhaustive as possible to say, okay, here's all of the different audience personas in my social media, not my Marketo program per se. They might be the same, but they might not be as well too. And if they can give you as many of those custom audience lists in advance to build those out, I think that's kind of the best way to do that.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. The marketing operations. So now we're getting into the user interface. We've built a foundation. We've done the due diligence on what the organization is structured like, so that we're keeping in guidance with the standard operating procedures for our enterprise. So now we've poured the foundation of the house. It's all set. Now we want to build up the studs, the slats, the walls, the foundation of the house, and now we're into the Marketo instance itself and kind of saying, okay, well, what database lists do we need in each of our workspaces? Or if we don't have to have workspaces, by the way. You can build these within a separate folder, and I'm going to show you an example a little later on from a sandbox where we just did it by folders. You don't have to have a different workspace if your organization is set up that way to kind of make that in security between brands is not that crucial of an issue. So what global smart lists do you need to set up? And this will probably marry a lot of what you've done in your existing instances. Do you have a smart list for internal stakeholders? Do you have a smart list that talks about the total addressable market? Is the total addressable market different for breakfast cereals versus security cameras versus pet foods? Probably. But those are questions to ask. What other frequently used audiences? Is there an audience of sales managers? Is there an audience of key distributors owners of key distributors that you work with? And then in terms of segmentations, right? So there's a space sometimes where you want to be able to break up your database into segmentations, and sometimes where you don't. And the benefit of doing it into segmentations is that you have the ability to use this dynamic content piece where you're generating one email out, and then using Marketo to be able to pre-populate content that's branded to whomever that lead that is assigned to that you want to be talking about. But the only time where that's really useful, or there's other times I guess where that's not useful, but the time where it is useful is if I'm sending out to a group where I can only exist in a segment for one type of brand and not none of the other types of brands, right? So we use this, and I'm going to show you an example a little later on where we send an email out to a network of corporately owned dealerships. And a lead can only exist in one, can only be owned by one corporately owned dealership at a time. But if you were to send, so a segmentation would work out well there. If you send it to a group of independent dealers, so think of like a franchise network or something like that. I could live in Indianapolis and be involved talking to one of those franchisees and talking to a second franchisee at the exact same time. So I would exist in both segments. It doesn't work. You can't, use dynamic content that way and be able to send the same email to two different brands with one segmentation. So it'll make more sense when you see the screenshot, but I just want to kind of mention in advance. Sometimes you want to use dynamic content, and sometimes you need to do that kind of work in advance to kind of say, where is that not applicable? Where is it better that we actually just use tokens and be able to put emails, branded content that way? So one of the things that we've done to be able to make this whole process easier to build out dynamic or to build out content that's branded is we built out a template that basically allows you to be able to map out all of the different tokens that you might use in an email. So, if you build the layout inside of an email and you think, well, I can quickly replace the logo and the trade dress, the color schemes that are used, and I can quickly swap out the initial paragraphs and some of the copy that are inside of there, maybe the call to action button. That's easy to be able to build into Marketo inside of a tokenized asset, and then be able to move from kind of one folder to another folder. But it's harder for a designer that isn't in Marketo. So if you sub out your creative to a different agency that just does HTML layouts, or builds email templates and doesn't understand tokens at all, they're not going to understand. I'm going to replace the color scheme by a token that says my dot primary color scheme. That doesn't make a lot of sense to them. But what we usually do is kind of build out a spreadsheet that kind of helps to map out all of those different variables that you'll see. We're going to show you that a little bit later on. And that's something that you can quickly save and then send over to another agency and just say, okay, well, whenever you need a logo, please put in this token. Whenever you need our primary color for the background of a table, put in this token, et cetera, and it'll look just fine inside of Marketo. So we built that, and that's available on our website at conversionstore.com/branding, and you can download that as a takeaway. And so we want to be able to build emails that kind of match the brand guidelines for each of those different brands, and also prevent different marketers or different stakeholders inside of your Marketo instance from making changes that might move that email so that it's off brand. And so one of the ways to do that is to be able to kind of really make sure that you're modifying your template to say, what are the local variables that allow us to kind of match the trade dress for this email that we want to be able to allow people to modify, and which ones should we make sure that we hard code into the template that people can't modify, and then remove those templates out. So you can do all of those through code, and so that's a piece of it. And then the other piece of it is being able to use snippets. So you'll see here, this is an example of being able to build in an email content by segmentation, so that you have 3 different snippets here. Maybe one that has the contact information of the dealership, one that has a paragraph that speaks specifically about that brand, and one that actually has the logo of the brand. They might put in other snippets that talk about the social sharing buttons that would be on this email as well too. So there's a number of different ways to be able to code that out to make sure that instead of having to rewrite this and rebrand it from scratch, I can just quickly drop in a snippet and I get all the branded elements that are pre-populated by Marketo. So that's a list of some of the different marketing activities. We'll skip through that quickly. And then really to kind of make a look at this. So let's think about when you're inside of your Marketo instance. This is without a workspace at all. I just have 2 folders here, one that says Cheerios, one that says Cinnamon Toast Crunch that you see highlighted here. And inside of those, I have a default program that maybe listens and manages a contact us form, and one that has an email campaign to be able to send out. I differentiate those by basically from each brand, the form that's being filled out. It's a global form that exists in Design Studio, but I always set a trigger inside of Marketo that just listens for the form when it's filled out by Cheerio for a referrer that is from Cheerios.com, and that's going to the Cheerios program. And the one that's CinnamonToastCrunch.com is the same thing there, and that's how you're differentiating. The same form gets filled out, but it gets assigned to the so you don't have to add an extra piece of code into your landing page, but basically Marketo is already parsing out which lead is supposed to go to the Cheerios branded creative, which lead is supposed to go to the Cinnamon Toast Crunch branded creative. And that creative, like we mentioned, we're using the spreadsheet that kind of gives you all of those different tokens. And you'll see that that's actually cascading down. It's inherited from the Cheerios folder, and it actually shows up inside of your default program, which also shows up in your emails and in all of your other creatives, so that you're having the Cheerios brand. You see all of the hex values for the Cheerios trade color. If you go to the exact same program, I just cloned out the exact same thing, didn't make any changes to it, and now when I look inside of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, all of that information is being translated over to that brand as well. So you don't have to make any changes. You just really copy and paste, and you're immediately getting the same branded elements that are coming across. So it's scalable. It's very fast to be able to implement out. And then the last piece, so just looking at the email side of things, is that's what's inherited. Now you can also add in other elements for the local creative that's created inside of there. So if you're sending an email out, you've got a token that talks about the subject line, a token that talks about some of the copy inside of there, and all of that gets built out as well. So it's still on brand. It's still matching all of the other requirements for the brand identity that the overall organization is setting up. But it's easy to roll this out, to clone this email program, change those 3 tokens, you're done. That's it. And then the last piece I want to talk about here, and then I'll open it up for questions, is really just to talk about reporting. So you've already done the work to build the foundation. You're already building your marketing programs, and all of those marketing programs require you to specify which brand, which business unit that you're building them for. And the benefit of that now is now you have the ability to quickly go in and go into all of your reports, and you have a tag that says, here's a business unit, here's the brand, and quickly filter out, okay, I want to build out a report now. I only want to see it for this specific brand that I'm working on. And that's available in quite a few of your analytics reports that you'll see. You can also see it in the email insights tab, where you can quickly filter in by a workspace, for example, or you could use a program naming convention as well here. And you, especially if you use Revenue Cycle Explorer, you'll see on the left-hand side here that I have business units plus all of the different locations. So in this specific instance, we have over 250 locations with different domain names that are all tied into one Marketo unit. And Marketo tracks all of the leads that are generated, make sure that they have a branded experience for all of those 250 locations, and then at the end of the day pulls that into the database in such a way that you can do reporting on it, or you can even do charting. This is all native inside of Revenue Explorer, where you have that ability to be able to say, okay, for this business unit, here are the leads that I had month over month that are coming in from trade shows, from web form fills, from other promotional activities, from location-based marketing, from social media marketing. And that really closes the loop to be able to demonstrate value in multiple business units with one Marketo instance. That's it for me. So that covers it off in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'll put a copy of the slides and the presentation up on conversionstore.com/Indy2020, and would be happy to take any questions and answer anything that you might have about what we've discussed today.
All right. Thank you, Michael. I guess I'm not muted anymore. Yeah, I really do appreciate you taking the time here. We are going to record this, and so anybody that missed the beginning of it will be putting out a link for you as well. But yeah, that was really good, Michael. I think it's helpful. I know that like Liz and I have been working on some of the tokenizing some programs to use like tokens for colors and stuff like that. And actually just putting the token name right in those email templates instead of the hex value, putting the tokens in there. So it gets kind of, it gets kind of flaky when you're looking at it in editor mode, but then when you go into preview mode, the magic sort of happens and everything comes together and it looks a lot better. But yeah, there are a lot of powerful things that you can do with tokens. Segmentation is definitely one of those tricky things that I think you do need to think hard about that, because within a segment you can have 100 individual segments, but a person can only belong to one segment. So segmenting doesn't really work for things like your cereal example, because I'm not going to commit to eating Cheerios for the rest of my life, and I cannot have Honey Nut Cheerios or Cinnamon Toast Crunch. So clearly, I think those things. That's where segmentation is not a good solution, but it certainly is in other ways, especially if you're looking at kind of straight up, B2B marketing, where you're looking for influencers and you're looking for hierarchy in an organization or something like that, and you want to segment message differently to the C-suite than you might to sort of the director levels or manager and operation level within that. So yeah, good points on that as well. So appreciate that. I don't know, did anyone have any more questions for Michael or in the group?
I was going to say, not a question. I just think this was wildly helpful, and I'm probably going to go through this again in like a week or so just to figure out how this could best serve our clients. I mean, I work for an agency, and I can think of one in particular that they have, 2 workspaces and 2 different kind of segments of their business that they're now trying to combine into one. But regardless, there's a lot of valuable information in here that I think could really help. So just from my perspective, it's been really helpful, and I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. If you have questions about this, I'm happy to be able to answer any of those offline as well, too. And definitely, I think where I first started to come across it was more companies that acquired a different business that had Marketo, for example, and then they run into that challenge. But definitely, if you have 2 different workspaces that are available, I think the first thing that I would look at there is to kind of check the workspace to partition rules and see if they have a second partition as well. Do you know if they have a second one?
I don't off the top of my head, but I will go in and look that up.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big one to see. And then, if you can check the users and see how many, if you go into your users area in Marketo, in your users area in Marketo, you should be able to kind of see all of the different users that are there and the number of workspaces that they have access to. And also likewise from the workspaces side of things, it'll show you the number of users that are there, so you can see what the split is. And you don't necessarily need to have it. You may need to have it, right? So it's always worth kind of taking a look at exactly how those are used, because a workspace can be used in a multitude of different ways.
Great. Yep, all good points.
Yeah. Well, excellent. If there are no more questions for Michael, I guess really just to sort of I didn't prepare other topics for today, but I would like to know, like, to me, it's uncertain as far as how long people are going to be still in their quasi-quarantine state. I'm a remote work from home person anyway, so I'm quarantined all year long. So, but as far as what are some other topics that people would like to have? We can try and schedule, some more virtual meetings to cover different topics. I've also have messages from some people that do want to sponsor some of our meetings. So I think those are some of our face-to-face meetings as well. So that will probably be more towards the end of the year when people are are venturing out unless people want to wear masks and stuff like that. But I think we can coordinate a face-to-face event if people want to do that. I'm certainly open to it, so I just am sensitive to other people's concerns and stuff like that. So so feedback. What are people's thoughts?
I'm open. I have no qualms about meeting as of now, if everyone else is comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I don't probably imagine Josh is going to make the flight over, but
Yeah, well, if he came for the Indy 500 and it was going on,
yeah,
then we could deal with that. But, yeah. So,
You're in Charlotte. I think NASCAR is starting up pretty early on too.
yeah.
So I think you're getting into
Well, we do have the Brickyard 400, so.
Can't see Warren making the flight from England or JD from California either. So.
Yeah.
Right. Still a little far.
One thing I can tell you just from, I think Warren and I and now Josh are going to a lot of the different mugs to kind of check them out. And a lot of people are doing kind of, excuse me, a mixture of happy hour events. So that might be a good one too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it usually ends up with good discussions as well that come off the back of it, because when you shove a load of Marketo people into one room and you leave it open, Marketo comes up. So then there's discussions obviously start anyway, even though it's supposed to be a happy hour, but whatever makes people happy.
Yeah, as an example of that, the Austin, Texas mug had a petting zoo, a virtual petting zoo event where they had a guy get around and take a camera phone and kind of go to all of the different the goat area and the pig area and the lamb area, whatever, and all of us were on there. And then after it ended, actually, that turned into probably about a 30 or 45-minute discussion about all sorts of different things, from just trends in the marketing industry with how people are shifting from in-person to online events and things like that. It's incredible to just see just collectively how people get going once you get the creative juices flowing with everybody in the same area.
Right. Well, see, Warren's brought his own petting zoo with him, so.
That's from all the dog food analogies.
Yeah, I apologize. I had to jump out a minute there because my dog was just going nuts at my front door. I'm like, I gotta shut my front door. She's just barking her head off.
Yeah.
What would really pick it up is if you guys got Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
It's part of what I've really loved about all of these calls, these mug calls, all these virtual calls, is just actually like seeing everyone's pets that are coming through. Getting to meet everyone's cats and dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, Liz, your cat's not walking across the keyboard right now, so.
Oh yeah, was that yesterday? I was talking to you that the cat's just like in my face. I'm like, get out of here, but not right now.
I'm always interested to see the wall ornaments.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you've been to Paris, Caroline, or if that just happens to be.
I have. I actually took that picture, and that's why it
Really?
is angled down because I'm so short. So that was the best shot I could get.
That's impressive. That looks great.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my husband works for a sign company, which is why we have the sign color printout behind me.
Really good.
And my office is now green. It used to be yellow, so that the walls have changed around me, but yeah. But as far as the dogs, I leave them outside because they like to lay under the desk and on the cords, and they'd be unplugging me right in the middle of the meeting and stuff like that. So,
Has anybody been to a meeting
and the
where
chickens never come inside, so it's just.
Mine is far too lazy and spends his time on my bed asleep.
Aww, so cute.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen Atticus move. Gosh.
What was that, Warren?
I don't think I've ever seen Atticus move.
No, he doesn't. He's an ex-racing greyhound. He spends like 90% of his life asleep on our bed. So,
Is he a senior? How is he? Is he? How old is he?
he's 4.
He's just 4. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's 4. He wasn't very good at racing.
Say this
Well,
is
someone's
Lucy.
got to be last, right?
Oh,
You're right.
Hmm.
He's adorable.
Oh, who was that?
so this is Lucy.
Oh
Oh,
my god.
She's a good girl.
I can't wait till mine
Excellent.
calms down, so she's like that too. Has anybody been photobombed yet? Have anybody had like the BBC interview where the little kid comes in and the mom has to? I was
I
on
actually,
That's
yeah.
my favorite video of all time. That's the cutest video I've ever seen in my life.
Oh no, I love the walking in like that.
yeah.
Yeah, my husband and I, when we were both home from work in the like early March, my husband took a picture. They were walking, they would crawl past the back of my office because my husband's desk is like on the other side of me. And like he like took a picture of them because it's just so funny. Like every morning and every evening, every time I was on a call, they'd be like sneaking behind me, and I'd be like, I would think I actually put it on social media. I was like, this is what my day consists of, like my kids crawling behind me, and I have to like pretend like I don't hear and see them like chit chatting to my husband next to me.
I was at Digital Summit at Home conference a couple of weeks ago, and a lady who was presenting, her 3-year-old had a temper tantrum in the middle of the presentation,
Oh.
and
Oh,
I felt
no.
so bad. She was unbelievable, actually. She really held firm, did not break a bit, but and I think was able to kind of. You could see you're kind of calming her down in the process at the time, but I'm impressed. I couldn't do it. I mean, I've had times. I had this puppy actually steal the. So I have a security system and I have a flood sensor. Somehow she found the flood sensor in the house, picked it up, started running up and down the house, tripping off the. So
Oh no.
thankfully it wasn't like a live conference; it was a
That's
client
really
call,
funny.
but
Yeah.
very difficult.
Yeah.
Jessica's
I've
on
had,
mute. That's probably because her dogs are barking too. So
yeah. I've had a couple of like large loud crashes that I'm just like, like I wait that extra couple seconds. I'm like, all right, I don't hear screaming, so I think we're good. Like, I don't know what that was. I'll figure that out in a little bit, but no one's screaming, and there's 3 of them, so someone would be screaming if there was a problem.
yeah, there's a lot of interesting things now that you run into. I think for me, one thing that I've noticed is like people come into our house like and they broadcast from the door that they're here. So we have one of the classic, the old wooden frame screen door, and so you literally hear the screen door slam, and kind of as Bruce Springsteen sings about. But yeah, the door opens, the screen door slams, and somebody starts yelling, "Hey, what's going on?" It's like, oh yeah, I'm on a conference call right now.
Yes.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, I've had that. My office is like down the hallway from my front door, and people waltz in because I keep my front door typically like we have a glass door, and my friends will walk in, all my neighbors will walk in, start doing that, and I'm like, hold on, mute, 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 mute. I'm like, I'm on a call.
I think one of the things that's
Still
starting to weird me
recording.
out now.
I'm going to stop
Sorry.
our recording.